सलाम सब साथियों को। सबसे पहले तो थैंक यू फॉर जॉइनिंग टुडेज सेशन। ये हमारा पहला सेशन है एसआरजी के थर्ड समर कोर्स के लिए, विच इज़ ऑन द थीम ऑफ नेशनल लिबरेशन एंड रेवोल्यूशन। जो सेशन है उसका बाकायदा आगाज़ करने से पहले आई वुड जस्ट लाइक टू गिव अ बिट ऑफ इंट्रोडक्शन अबाउट द प्लेटफॉर्म जो एसआरजी है। So basically, Socialist Reading Group हमने 2022 में फॉर्म किया था, and it's led by student organizers and young political workers, और एक पाकिस्तान का it's the largest digital platform for revolutionary education. हम साल के थ्रू आउट हम डिफरेंट सेशंस करते हैं डिफरेंट टॉपिक्स पर, मार्क्सिस्ट थ्योरी के डिफरेंट एस्पेक्ट्स पर, लेकिन जो हमारा सबसे आई थिंक लोग जिसे रिकग्नाइज करते हैं और सबसे ज़्यादा जिस पर रिस्पॉन्स आता है, दैट्स द एनुअल समर कोर्स। जो पहला वाला था दैट वाज ऑन giving like an introduction to Marxism, especially its formulation in this region. And then building upon that, our second summer course was on anti-imperialism, and this one is on national liberation and revolution. तो और हम ये भी कोशिश करते हैं कि something that sets our platform apart is that we don't just have on the usual faces you would see talking about the left, मतलब sitting abroad or just merely academics or intellectuals. We have on a wide range of people. We have on people who are very actively working in different movements. We do have academics and intellectuals actively writing about those movements. And हम young political workers को, left leaders को, nationalist leaders को, मुख्तलिफ हम जो लोग पाकिस्तान में ground पे left की politics या मुजामती तहरीकों में एक्टिव हैं उनको अपने प्लेटफॉर्म पे देते हैं, एंड इट्स इन उर्दू और इंग्लिश डिपेंडिंग ऑन व्हाट द स्पीकर्स आर कंफर्टेबल विद। सो जो इस साल का समर कोर्स है, हमने इसलिए इसका थीम नेशनल लिबरेशन और रेवोल्यूशन रखा था क्योंकि जो पिछले साल से फ़लस्तीन में नस्ल कुशी जारी है इज़राइल की तरफ से, एंड बैक्ड बाय द यूएस एम्पायर एंड ऑल इट्स एलाइज, हम इंपीरियलिज्म की एक बहुत मतलब बदतर और खूनी शक्ल इख्तियार करता हुआ हम इंपीरियलिज्म को देख रहे हैं। और इस रीजन में भी हमने देखा है कि एक मतलब जिंगोइज्म, वॉर्स, इन चीज़ों की अब नई लहर उठनी शुरू हुई है। और एक और इसी चीज़ की रेजिस्टेंस में और ऑपोजिशन में जो हमने पिछले साल से एज पैलेस्टाइन में हमने देखा है, जैसे सॉलिडारिटी फ़लस्तीनी कॉज के लिए बढ़ी है, उसी के साथ-साथ पाकिस्तान में भी जो मूवमेंट्स हैं रियासती जबर के खिलाफ, नेशनल ऑपरेशन के खिलाफ, मिलिट्री रूल के खिलाफ, वो भी बढ़ी हैं और उन पे अब आजकल शदीद किस्म का क्रैकडाउन और उनके खिलाफ मतलब एक नैरेटिव बनाना भी जारी है हुक्मरान तबके की तरफ से। So we thought that it's integral that right now young people on the left develop an analysis and an understanding कि Marxist जो formulation या theory है नेशनल लिबरेशन की, इनकलाब की, वो क्या है, हमारी कंडीशंस में कैसे अप्लाई करती है, कि हमारे गिर्द जो दुनिया में हो रहा है, हमारे अपने खित्ते में हो रहा है, उसके बाद उसे हम समझ सकें और उससे भी ज़्यादा अहम हम ऐसी स्ट्रैटेजीज़ बना सकें और अपने आप को मुनज़्ज़म कर सकें इस चीज़ की मुखालफत करने के लिए। तो विदाउट फर्दर डिले मैं इंट्रोड्यूस करूँगी आज जो हमारे स्पीकर हैं, प्रोफेसर कलंदर मेमन। Comrade Qalandar has worked closely with PRSF in the past. He teaches at FC College, and Naked Punch के वो editors में से भी हैं, and Naked Punch very frequently covers जो इधर on ground movements different parts of the country में चल रही हैं, highlights many of those voices working within those movements, and puts out, Comrade Qalandar and others there put out frequent analysis on these too. And I would highly recommend that after this session you go and check out the Naked Punch page too. उसके साथ साथ अभी कॉमरेड पीपल्स हिस्ट्रीज ऑफ पाकिस्तान पे काम कर रहे हैं, which I think will shed a lot of light on the sort of erased histories in this region. So you should also look out for that जब वो निकलती है उनकी किताब। So thank you so much, comrade, for joining us today. तो जो पहला सवाल होगा आपसे, what we mainly want to do is for you to lay out for us in this session क्या थर्ड वर्ल्ड मार्क्सिज्म की जो theoretical एक framework है वो क्या है, क्योंकि एक साइड पे तो इवन अर्बन सेंटर्स में जो आपको मार्क्सिस्ट पर्टिकुलरली एकेडेमिया में मिलते हैं, वो भी कभी-कभी हम यूरोसेंट्रिक डिस्कोर्स के अंदर ही स्टक होते हैं और हमें ये तनकीद भी मिलती है बहुत से हलकों से कि मार्क्सिज्म तो यूरोसेंट्रिक कोई आइडियोलॉजी है। लेकिन उसके बिल्कुल बरक्स 20वीं सदी के थ्रू आउट मूवमेंट्स रही हैं, थिंकर्स रहे हैं, थ्योरेटिकल एडवांसमेंट्स रही हैं, एंड एक्चुअली सम ऑफ द मोस्ट सक्सेसफुल मूवमेंट्स जिन्होंने अमली तौर पे मार्क्सिज्म को अप्लाई किया अपने समाज में कामयाबी से, वो तीसरी दुनिया में रही हैं, ये ग्लोबल साउथ में। So we mainly wanted for you to explain to us this third world Marxism that combines जो national liberation और जो class struggle और socialist revolution की जदोजहद है उनको, और किस तरीके से हम फिर इस तरफ भी जाएं कि इधर कैसे वो अप्लाई करता है, तो उसके जो आपको लगता है कि theoretical foundations हैं, उसके key features हैं, उसके thinkers हैं, उन पे आप हमारे लिए अगर थोड़ी रोशनी डाल।
Thank you. So it's a very good question. I mean, Marxism and third worldism and third world Marxism, we can separate them. We can see that there is third worldism is in a sense broader than Marxism. Right? It encompasses Marxism, but it also takes on other forms of anti-colonial resistance. So we use the term nativism, which basically means kind of looking backwards to pre-colonial society for inspiration, for liberation. So Gandhi हम कह सकते हैं is a nativist एक हद तक. Any philosopher, thinker who is kind of looking at the pre-colonial model, even some elements of Pan-Africanism, they can be Marxist and they can also be nativist in some sense. So there was a movement in the Caribbean and African diaspora called Negritude movement, which a lot of famous decolonial thinkers like Emile Cesar were founders of and participants in. And it was about recovering the sense of self for the, I mean, I'm using the term of the time, for the Negro, for the Black person. And these were seen as nativist movements. So they're not Marxist movements in that sense, but they are anti-colonial movements. So it's very difficult to unpick, what is third world Marxism, what is third worldism, and what is, in a sense, Pan-Africanism. They are heterogeneous. They overlap with each other. When you study them, you see that people who belong to different camps come together in the anti-colonial struggle. And I think one of the problems we have maybe in the post-colonial situation is precisely the unity that colonialism gave us, against, it was colonized binary, in that the differences kind of can be subsumed, but after, in the post-colonial situation, those differences may have arisen again in certain contexts and made it more difficult for us to build that unity in the post-colonial situation. A good way to begin to situate third worldism, and I'm going to read from an unpublished paper on third worldism, is to see it, and I think I want to say that third worldism, including third world Marxism, which is one element of third worldism, has a history almost as soon as we have colonialism, there is resistance. So from that resistance, this philosophical discourse is born. And I think my work when I was a younger student in England was about trying to see third world thinkers, decolonial thinkers, third worldists we could call them, as philosophers. I think that's a good point for me to start with. We often, when we study formal political philosophy in institutions, we're not given Che Guevara, Fidel Castro. They're not seen as political thinkers, i.e. they're not seen as contributing concepts in political philosophy, nor is someone like Fanon. Recently, he's being kind of studied a bit more, nor are Paulo Freire and C.L.R. James. So there's this kind of almost racial exclusion of people of color from political philosophy, the formal worlds of Western, if you study political philosophy, even in Pakistan, you're going to get thinkers, if you go really far back, you'll get Aristotle, Plato. Then if you go closer to our time, you'll get, Harvard professors like Rawls and Nozick, and many other thinkers like John Stuart Mill and others. But you're not going to get thinkers from the third world, Gandhi, Fanon, CLR, Freire, Nkrumah, Guevara. So my work was to try and see them as part of the canon, to see them as thinkers, not just and activists, not that you can separate the two, and bring them into that canon. So you have, on the one hand, you have liberalism, which we see, if you take EU as a liberal project with its Enlightenment ethos, uh, then you can see the bankruptcy or the underside of it in Gaza with these statements of sometimes checking Israel, but also allowing it, which is kind of constantly what this Latin American philosopher Enrique Drizel, one of the great thinkers of our time, he calls the underside of modernity is colonialism. So liberalism is this kind of twin coin with an underside, which has always been colonialism. So it's kind of, I don't want to go into a critique of liberalism, but a very good passage where that kind of underside comes out is John Stuart Mill's On Liberty, where he's defining his harm principle, and then he says, after defining it, that it doesn't apply to those societies who are in a state of non-being or in a, effectively, he's talking about the third world, people of color. He says it doesn't apply to us because we haven't quite developed reasoning to a sufficient level to have liberty. We need a strong dictatorial ruler. So these kind of double binds within liberalism constantly come out in practice as well in EU, and the way it deals with Israel and the genocide going on in Gaza is a very clear illustration. But we could go back in history and look at British India, or we could look at more recently Iraq war. But Gaza is right in front of us, so we can take that. So that liberalism was always going to not radiate for me as a person of color. Then, of course, you have neoliberalism, neoconservatism as ideologies, and conservatism. They were kind of dead ends as a person of color in the UK for me. So I discovered, and along with many, many other people, was rediscovering rather than discovered third world thinkers and tried to put them into the canon of philosophy. To do that, I had to understand, well, what is third worldism? Reading these texts as an individual, I noticed they have a lot of commonality. So third worldism is a philosophy. It's not. It's like liberalism. It's like conservatism. It's heavily influenced by Marxism. But it is also has elements which go beyond Marxism. And the wonderful thing about third worldism, I think, is that it's constantly forming, because one of its main kind of categories is that it is born from resistance. So let me put it another way. What are the political, economic, social concepts that come out of our struggle? Those concepts are what defines and creates third worldism. Our actions create the concepts, or our concepts create the action. And when we agree upon them, or we refine them, put them in speeches and manifestos, that is what forms the discourse of third worldism. And I find that you cannot understand the world today, and from purely looking at it from the other isms. You have to understand that a lot of the world is motivated from third worldism. So BRIC, the current alliance of many South countries, is a third worldist project. Along with it is ALBA in Latin America, another third world project. There has been talk of Bank of the South, which would be a third world project. There's also statements of solidarity with Palestine and actions of solidarity with Palestine coming from third world countries. You cannot understand any of this because unless you study third worldism, but it isn't studied. It is written out of the academic discourse. It's kind of put in comparative literature. These thinkers are studied, and I think that reduces our ability to understand the world, because most of the world operates from concepts developed during decolonization, the formal decolonization, and now against neo-imperialism. And the concept we've developed in conversation with each other is what is the discourse of third worldism. Third worldism is two things. It's a discourse, so it's a set of ideas which are constantly being made by us and changed, but few we already, there's kind of a lot of agreements on. And it's a project. So the ideas are put into practice by nation states and non-nation state actors as well. But nation states have also, after formal decolonization, taken third worldism into the UN. and other fields. So it's a project which is often led by nation states like BRIC, and it's also a discourse, which is where I think I and others, partake in the discourse, everyday actions of being in anti-colonial, anti-imperialist movements. So it's both. I'm going to read a small passage which situates it. And this is a quote from Robert Young, who has a fantastic book published in 2001 called Post-Colonialism, A Historical Introduction. It's a very, very good book to understand anti-colonial movements. The quote from him is, "The history of colonialism is characterized throughout by intransient opposition to conquest and rebellions against alien domination and loss of sovereignty. The soil of North and South America, of Africa, of South and Southeast Asia remains rich with the blood of resistance." Third worldism is that richness of the blood of resistance. Um, its roots go back to anti-colonial liberation movements such as the Haitian one in 1781, 1804, led by Toussaint, and written about by C.L.R. James. Probably one of the great texts of third worldism is this, the Black Jacobins by C.L.R. James and the Haitian Revolution. And I think it's interesting as we're talking about Marxism within third worldism. So that is, as I said, one element of third worldism, and CLR is one of those pioneer third world Marxists. So he wrote this in the 1930s, and it's a classic on agency of non-white people to shape their world and to conceptually think. CLR's whole point was to show that people of the third world can create a revolution, have created a revolution, can create many, many more revolutions. So one of the things that colonialism has done and neo-colonialism does, and it does it in our everyday lives, it does it also at a grander level, which is to make us think that everything is fixed and we have no agency. And CLR's project with this book was to show that actually there's already been a revolution by Black slaves, the lowest strata of the world at that time. Slaves, Black, in Haiti, one of the richest colonies, but the lowest strata in that most brutalized group, they, uneducated on the whole, they led a sophisticated revolution against the empires of the time, the French, the English, the Spanish, and they defeated them all. And they also supported Simón Bolivar, the Latin American liberator. So this is a very important text of third worldism. So if liberalism has important texts like Utilitarianism of Bentham or Mill, then we have books like CLR's Third Black Jacobins. So you have Toussaint's revolution, the South America, which creates, begins the primitive is the wrong word, begins the formation of conceptual thinking of the world from the perspective of people of color, from our perspective, from the third world perspective. Liberation movement of Simón Bolivar is another inspiration. Nat Turner's slave rebellion in 1831. In India, our 1857 War of Independence or Indian Mutiny, whichever way you look at it, Morat Bay, Maori Wars. These are just some of the struggles against colonialism that may not have succeeded absolutely, but they created a conceptual lens. They created political, economic, social norms and concepts, which if we study the manifestos, the letters of Toussaint, we can see. From this, we get into some more I would say closer to our time, let's say, more concrete forms and mappings of third worldism. Because the third world, a good way to think about third worldism is, this kind of philosophy that is born from Latin America, South America, Asia, and Africa when they talk to each other. I'll come back to that point. So you have, in the same book, Robert Young lists 8 kind of forms of resistance or anti-colonialism. And third worldism isn't all of them, but I'll just go through them and then point out which one third worldism is. So you have anti-colonialism, that is European moral and humanitarian objections, i.e. Enlightenment objections to slavery and colonialism, anti-slavery movements, and Kantian right theories as well. Then you have European liberal economic objections such as Adam Smith, Cobden, Bright, and other thinkers who objected to colonialism from a liberal economic perspective. Then you have European, non-European rivalry between each other, which also have anti-colonial elements. Assertion of political rights to self-determination in settler colonies, so that's USA, Canada. Five, colonial nationalism, bourgeois nationalism, such as we have in Pakistan and India, Turkey, Egypt, Kenya. Anti-colonial internationalism, Pan-Africanism, Pan-Arabism, Pan-Islamism, Khilafat movement, negritude movement, African socialism. Industrial strikes, agitation over land, communalism, protest, migration, peasant revolts. These were also resisting colonial powers as well. And finally, Marxist internationalism and armed national liberation movements. Third worldism is predominantly 6 and 8. So 6 was anti-colonial internationalism, Pan-Africanism, Arabism, Islamism, Khilafat movement, and 8 was Marxist internationalism. So third worldism pretty much combines those two. And for me, there are two kind of moments of third worldism, at least two. There are many more. The first we can call as from 1920s to about 1960s, and you can call this the Bandung moment, where you have figures like Nehru, Ho Chi Minh, Nasser, and Nkrumah. And here it's the nation state project, and it's about uniting the third world independent countries to set a new agenda for the international. And that's a great moment. And I think we had an anniversary recently of this conference in Bandung, so it's definitely worth studying. And a lot of concepts developed from that change international relations at the nation state level. But there's a second phase which I'm more interested in. This is what I call, and many other thinkers call, the tricontinental moment of third worldism. And this is overtly Marxist, and this kind of has a nodal point, or a point of, point of infection, where it becomes very visible in the Tricontinental Conference in Havana in 1966, where many guerrilla fighters, Marxist guerrilla fighters from across the world came to Havana, or if they couldn't come, they sent letters like Guevara did, to the conference. And this is Marxist internationalism, and this is kind of the peak of third worldism and the third world discourse and project. So in this phase, in this second phase from 1966 or 1960s to, I would say, present, one form of third worldism, tricontinental variety, is born, which is overtly Marxist. And the important figures here are Fanon, the movement in Algeria is important, Che Guevara and Cuban Revolution is very important, Mao in China is of course always important. So this second period of third worldism that I call the tricontinental period shares a lot with the first period, but it has some distinction. It's more about armed revolution, it's more overtly Marxist, and it's more overtly about international solidarity. So you look, just look at the figures I mentioned, Guevara, Fanon. So if you take Che Guevara, he doesn't see the question, I think, and again, we don't have, we need to do a few sessions on this, but the concept of the self in all of this is really important. There's a Canadian philosopher, Charles Taylor, has a wonderful book, very conservative thinker, but he has a wonderful book called The Sources of the Self, where he looks at the Western self from ancient Greece up to the present, and he traces how the self is seen in all these periods and how it changes. And I think someone really needs to write that similar book for the third world, because what we get at the tricontinental moment is something amazing. It's not that it doesn't happen before, but we see it in grander action, maybe more into action. The thought is really put out into action, which is that the self is no longer Cuban, Argentinian, Pakistani, Pakhtun, Baloch, Sindhi. The self is third world. any terrain where there is oppression, to paraphrase Che Guevara or even maybe Fanon, you can act. The terrain is not your nation state of action and resistance. So the concept of the self, Guevara and Fanon, if you read their writings, political writings, they do not refer, especially Fanon, he does not refer to himself as an Algerian revolutionary in solidarity with Algerians. He says third world. His solidarity is with Africa, and after Africa with the third world. Of course, Algeria is the beginning, and in a similar way, you look at the life of Comrade Che Guevara. This is his book on Congo. It's very poorly titled, The African Dream. It's actually the diaries of, I would just say the diaries of Che Guevara in the Congo. And for him, being in the Congo, being in Bolivia, being in Cuba makes no difference. Where there is oppression, where there is structures which reduce the human subject, there he has to fight. And that ability to see yourself in Cuba, in Congo, in Bolivia, and in Fanon's case, a Martinican person, intellectual who goes to France, fights in the French army against Nazism, gets a doctorate, and then goes and joins the Algerian Muslims. I mean, the gap from Martinique to Algiers geographically is huge, but conceptually it narrows. Fanon can identify, and the Algerians can identify with him. And interestingly, also with the Algerians was a Pakistani, Iqbal Ahmed. So, Faiz Ahmed Faiz was in Lebanon as well, and supported the PLO and used to meet Arafat and Palestinian poets such as Mohammed Darwish. So you have this amazing tricontinental moment of third worldism where the concept of the self expands into this amazing kind of, it's a bit, I'm very much as a Sindhi into Sufism, and the self is very important in Sufism, and the dissolving of the self can happen in many ways, annihilation in one sense, but also by just becoming everything, and this is like Manzoor al-Hallaj kind of Sufi mysticism, but this mysticism can also occur in political philosophy when you have people like Guevara, Fanon, to an extent Faiz Ahmed Faiz, and if I go really further back, although it challenges my own thesis, Bacha Khan, because he too had a very extended concept of what the self is. Primarily, he supported the Pakhtun movement, but he was in solidarity with everyone. So you see that the self in tricontinental third worldism is not fixated on one point. The third world as a space is all ours, and we all have to resist in any element of that fight against imperialism. It's not just about imperialism. I think Fanon sums it up really well. What third worldism wants to do is create a world of the you, create a world of humanism. And I think the concept of humanism in philosophy has been lost. Edward Said tried to kind of recover it. What Fanon has a concept of health with post-colonialism and postmodernism. A lot of sense of the subject has been getting distorted to kind of talk about subjects just living in discourse, as though we have no material life, as though we do not bleed, as though it is all discursive. And I think third worldism has this wonderful balance between being philosophical but not being so theoretical that you lose any sense of what people are going through, that our bodies are material, that we need food, that we need structures that not only work, liberate us mentally, but also in material terms, that we have something to eat, we have hospitals, we have education. And I think these are what the common analysis of all third world is to create a world of humanism where you have welfare state, where you have Marxist understanding of the economic structures of society. But culturally, they vary quite significantly. Some of them are nativist. Tricontinental third worlders are not nativist. Fanon, Guevara, many others, Paulo Freire, many others, they reject the notion that we can go back to a pre-colonial society. A very common idea among third worlders, Albert Memmi is another very important thinker, is that whatever was past, whatever the pre-colonial thoughts were, so think of nativism also as Iqbal, this idea that we can rejuvenate historical kind of concepts from or historical Islam and rise again. So third world is a bit pessimistic about that idea. They feel that while we can definitely see and recorrect the past, colonialism is a very total and violent phenomena that has destroyed the ability to recover concepts from the past. So the concepts we now can create for our future have to come from action and the process of decolonization itself. So a new person in our intermingling, in Guevara going to Cuba, going to Congo and meeting comrades there, in the interaction of Fanon, in meetings of Pan-Africanism, where he's meeting other delegates from Africa, in Malcolm X traveling in Africa and in Middle East, in these interactions of third world among themselves, talking to each other, we develop new concepts and we create new philosophies which are going to guide us. And ultimate aim is to create a new society and a new human being, like a human being more attuned and centered in nature with other comrades, and create a superstructure that, and this is the Marxist kind of analysis, create a super economics, not a super, create a base, an economic structure that allows a fairer distribution. So you see this in the first wave of decolonization. You see Nkrumah, of course, but also Nyerere and many others moving their countries towards socialism and equitable distribution of resources. We know that neocolonialism doesn't allow that where it tries, where that has been tried. Nyerere and Nkrumah were overthrown and sponsored overthrow. Che Guevara was assassinated. Fanon had 3 attempts on his life and he died of leukemia at a very young age. But before that, they had tried to assassinate him multiple times, the French intelligence. So the third world project, in a sense, the tricontinental variety, it has some features. Obviously, opposition to colonialism, that is obvious. To interaction among people of the third world, philosophical, political, artistic, to create something of our own. A belief that Europe has failed, including in some sense European Marxist movements, or not Marxist, at least some European left movements have failed. And that the dialectic in Hegelian sense, a lot of third worlders are Hegelian in the sense that they read Marx and Hegel and they thought in dialectical terms. And for them, the dialectic of history, and I would agree with them, has shifted to the third world. Europe can no longer go beyond itself. It knows only that kind of, and what Enrique Dussel calls, this kind of double side of enlightenment, kind of propagation of enlightenment values on the surface, and the underside of colonialism supporting the kind of enlightenment thought, or the discourse of enlightenment. It cannot go beyond it. America just apes the colonial structures of Europe. So where does something new, a new society that can be more human, come from? And for Fanon, for Guevara, for Freire, for Selma James, for many thinkers, this comes from the struggle of the third world, and those in the metropole in solidarity with the third world. So Fanon ends a lot of his books, especially Black Skin, White Mask, with the dream of a world of the you, a world where this kind of master-slave dialectic, colonizer-colonized, is broken. And I think that is another very important kind of point. If you read all these thinkers side by side, and I would recommend that you get all the works of Guevara, CLR, Nkrumah, Ho Chi Minh, Mao, and just read them side by side, you'll see that it feels sometimes that the same person is writing, because they shared so many of the concepts. And one of the concepts they shared is, although it is unstructured, it is a binary. You are master-slave, you are colonized, colonizers. There is no middle. You choose one side or the other. And I think with the Gaza situation, that is becoming very, very clear again. There is no middle ground. Colonialism doesn't leave you this middle space of ambiguity. You have to go one way or the other. This kind of binary is really critiqued in post-colonial theory and postmodernism, with concepts of hybridity and other concepts. But I actually would defend it, because it's not trying to be a truth statement, it's trying to be a strategic political maneuver of positioning us either against colonialism and imperialism, or with it. And it's kind of like the slogan of Occupy Wall Street, 1% versus 99%. These are not always truth descriptions. These are often ways of politically creating unity among yourself, creating a group, the 99, the colonized. And so that's another commonality. They believe in this kind of binary and positioning ourselves in the third world and the diaspora, which is in solidarity in the metropole, for this common struggle and to create structures, economic structures, as well as cultural and social structures that allow a human world and human relation to nature, animals, to ourselves, to our neighbors. And that is the dream. That is the dream of third worldism. And that is what I think many great people in the third world have fought for. So I'll stop here and I can expand on a few points in the question and answer session.
Thank you so much, Comrade. That was wonderful. I will just say that any people who want to leave questions for Comrade Qalandar, do so in the comment section. We will get to them. I mean, there's this tendency when we started the summer courses, we would just do like an internal meeting, post the video later. That would like sometimes make people want to engage more. But eventually, I feel like with the schedules people have, many people look at the full video later. So in that case, if you have questions or any point of discussion that you would want to engage with Comrade Qalandar on, you can certainly sign up for our discussion forum too, which can be found in like the page bios, the form. But for those who've tuned in, please do leave your questions in the chat and we will get to them. I had a follow-up question for you based on what you outlined, Comrade. And that is, you talked about the agency of the colonized in bringing about revolution, the right of self determination. And what it sounds like is that third worldism has given us a very concrete analysis of colonialism and imperialism too. Um, and I was wondering about how do we situate the what's happening in Pakistan right now, the role of the Pakistani state. How do we view that given this theoretical outline that you laid out? And this thesis that third world Marxists or people who, in this tradition reach, that Europe has failed, its institutions have failed, and those are the very colonial institutions that remain in this day. And I mean, those many of us would argue that they're at the root of the problem still in terms of national oppression, class oppression, many of these the undemocratic measures that are taken in society, all of these things. So, could you expand a bit on that about how we can apply these principles to build an analysis of Pakistan?
Sure. Sure. I think one of the limitations of third worldism, which is maybe where I deviate from some other thinkers on third worldism, is that it does, after decolonization, become a state project. And so you even have people like Bhutto kind of joining, and you can, and I don't think it's not a contradiction to see Pakistan or under certain moments being in the third world project in the UN. For example, they've supported some important third world and continue to give Palestinians voice. So you can see that, Bhutto, and even today in terms of giving space to Palestinians, supporting them in the UN and through diplomatic forums, that Pakistan at some level is part of this third world project. Yet we know the history of Pakistan, its collaboration with America. So we know, in effect, outside the diplomatic side, it does not really have any it doesn't really support third worldism or non-alignment as used to be the case. It never supported non-alignment. India did. So I think one of the critiques I have of third worldism, or one of the problematic ways of looking at it, is to see it only as a nation state project. It is a nation state project as well, but it's a people's project, and people can disagree within their nations with what their nation is doing. So that is very, very difficult to organize. Folks, nation states have money. People, small organizations do not have money. So I'm trying to understand what I've been thinking of as third world horizontalism rather than kind of nation state solidarity with other third world nation states and actions at the nation state level. What is the solidarity, such as the Palestinian solidarity movements that recently we've had people to people solidarity movements, including the ships that are trying to break the blockade. This is these blockade of Gaza. People have tried to break it multiple times with ships, and these are people's actions. So I think these are also organizations and actions which we need to see as part of the third world discourse and project, and that is where I think there is a lot to do and learn. How can we build, people to people, movement to movement solidarity, where we don't have state power, where it isn't the state kind of working with other people, but we're working with them. The other point to make is that third worldism, or the thinkers that I admire so much within third worldism, who I find have fruitful concepts to give me, and their lives also play out those concepts. So that's another moral force third worldists have. They not only talked about solidarity, Guevara, Fanon, they lived solidarity. No one can question their commitment to the people of the third world. They died in many cases, keeping that commitment alive. And I think, unfortunately, all these thinkers start critiquing the nation state. They start by late 60s, they're beginning to talk about the problems of the decolonial state, the fact that in Fanon's term that all that is changed is that the master's color has gone from white to brown. So that kind of critique begins. And Fanon in particular talks about how, and other thinkers talk about how to get the power to people and away from the national bourgeoisie. And that point, we're kind of stuck in that dialectic. That is still the project. How do we, get third world states in the hands of the people, and not the national bourgeoisie? I think, the national bourgeoisie is propped up by empire. And I think there's no other way to look at America except as an empire. And that's what we face. So you have in Pakistan many movements. So if you go back into history, talking about our local third world decolonial movements, we have such a rich history. We have during anti-colonialism, when the British were in Pakistan, controlling Pakistan, every region has a movement that is in solidarity with others. Ali Raza, a professor at LUMS, has a great book on internationalism in the 1930s from South Asia, and he, I think that's a book worth reading. But you also have, in every part of Pakistan, I'll just quickly list some. You have decolonial thinkers and activists. So in Balochistan, Pakhtun areas of Balochistan, you have people like Samad Khan Chakzai. He set up an organization called War Pashtun. In the Baloch side, you had Prince Abdul Karim, who started the first guerrilla war against the Pakistani state. But even before that, he was in for decolonization. Bazinjo, who was a member of Kalat Assembly, and he was the founder of Kalat National State Party. He and Chakzai worked together for many years, both against the British, anti-colonial. Bazinjo traveled India because he was a good goalkeeper, and he traveled India and he met comrades in Kerala and communists, and he was a Marxist himself and became a communist because of them. From the 1930s, he's left-leaning socialist. So obviously KP, you have Bacha Khan. Now Ghani Khan is kind of a Marxist on economic issues. And very interestingly, I think his name was Azam Khan. He was one of the founders of Khudai Khidmat Kar, and he went to Moscow in the 30s, and his nickname among his community was Bolshevik Khan. So you have with Bacha Khan Bolsheviks. So there's always this anti-colonial Marxism working its way through different kind of patterns in South Asia. In Sindh, you have the man from Mohenjo-daro, Subho Ganchandani, who went and studied under Tagore, was a Marxist, and he's known as the three-headed monster for the state of Pakistan, because he was a Marxist, Hindu, and what was the third one? Marxist Hindu. There was a third head which the state doesn't like. I forget right now. Working class, maybe. I can't remember the third one. So you have a lot of thinkers here, local to our region, Pakhtuns, Baloch from Gilgit-Baltistan as well, that are resisting colonialism, coming up with concepts, creating, organizations, creating culture. Very famously, Bacha Khan would have he created 127 schools. These schools under the British would also hold annual festivals of theater festivals, and these were very important plays. Women would be present, and they would critique society, a bit like ancient Greek theater, but better. And so the school children and others would put on plays. There would be poetry, decolonial competitions of poetry. So the subject would be decolonization, Pakhtun kind of nationalism, Pakhtun self, and the poets had to write and perform on those issues. So, and so there is a rich culture of resistance that is put down after the creation of Pakistan brutally multiple times. Firstly, you have the Babra massacre against Khudai Khidmatkar, where around 400 plus Khudai Khidmatkar are killed. You also have Bacha Khan going from the Constitute Assembly to jail. So he's a member of the Constitute Assembly to form the Constitution of Pakistan, and he's jailed for years. When he comes out, Bazinjo is also in and out of jail. When these third world Marxist thinkers come out, they form National Awami Party, but then we don't have an election. Political parties are banned, and Ayub takes over, and then there is one unit. So I guess there is a huge trajectory of resistance. And what's important is that Ayub was supported by America. Pakistan joins Sito and Santo. And one of the ways that our national bourgeoisie, our ruling elite, we can analyze it in detail and be more specific about it, but one of the ways it has survived and kept power away from people is precisely by leaning on America. Even the genocide we committed in East Pakistan was supported by Nixon and America and Kissinger for various reasons. So, or at least it wasn't curtailed by them. So, we've always, every time there are people movements, empire comes along and gives extra power, coercive structures are supported. When America is supporting Pakistan, it's supporting the military and they're supporting the coercive structure. So in the war on terror, we had the lawyers movement trying to dismantle the power of Musharraf to centralize all authority. But at the same time, the CIA is giving technology, they're giving billions to Musharraf and the military, which make our resistance, our people's movement much, much harder. And that was the case for the previous generation as well. And again, we're seeing something similar, that, the alignment of the Pakistani state, even maybe with China, I haven't studied it. They are creating in Balochistan under the new amended anti-terrorism amendments they've made in the law, they can detain people and send them to what they're calling re-education centers, right? This terminology is very frightening, that Baloch comrades can be sent without any consent for re-education. And, we're looking at torture chambers. These are not re-education centers. So again, where are these kind of ideas of oppression coming from? I guess third worldism has, as much as we cooperate and work with each other in resistance, there's always cooperation between the oppressors. So we know that the Israelis advise India on how to control Kashmir. I'm pretty sure Pakistan also buys software because Israel has very good spying software. I'm pretty sure we have contracts. I think I've read it somewhere. We bought technology from Israeli companies, if not the state. So the oppressors, in a sense, are constantly communicating on how to oppress people. And I guess third worldism is us also communicating on how to resist. So Malcolm X meeting, revolutionaries in Africa and learning from each other. There's a famous meeting in Harlem of Fidel Castro with Malcolm X. Guevara came to Pakistan. Unfortunately, he didn't meet too many of the activists, but there's this constant traveling, exchanging, sharing between the third world. But this also has already the empire sharing technologies of domination as well. So I hope that answered some of your question.
Certainly, Comrade. So we have just two follow-up questions. I'll ask both of them, and you can answer it however you like. So basically, there's one that connects to what you said before. It's Comrade, what would you call liberal projects that frame themselves as third worldist, like ASEAN, and other such NATO-run pacts? I mean, you mentioned Sito Sento anyway. Apart from that, another we would really since just today we found out about the American attacks on Iran in three locations. So we would also really like your perspective on the Israeli American aggression on Iran and how you see the Pakistani state's alignment and role right now, because there's a lot of confusion, I feel, on what is publicly being put out by the left on social media or the narrative. So, yeah, we would like that too. So,
Okay. So I think they're third world states uniting in kind of like creating blocks of solidarity, exchange, um, is opposed by America also, and the empire. And Europe sometimes, when it feels strong, has pretensions to also lead and create international blocks. 20 years ago, there was a really ambitious project of solving, according to them, solving Gaza issue by bringing Israel and Palestine into EU and expanding the EU as far as Middle East, saying, everyone can join the European Union as the civilizational project. That's completely fallen apart. But, there have been kind of European-led desires to hold on to uh, the old colonial territories, and I think that is opposed by blocks of unity and pan-Arabism, pan-Africanism. Unfortunately, we do not as yet have an imagination in South Asia. I think this is quite sad that in South Asia we don't talk enough about, if not, there's so much. We just had this kind of fighting between India and Pakistan, but if not some form of union, at least some form of porous borders for those communities that have historically lived across Kashmir, across Afghanistan, across Iran and Balochistan. We share borders with so many countries, and historically, people have not been confined in these areas to Pakistan, Iran, Kashmir, Gilgit Baltistan. So, the local communities demand porous borders, travel for themselves. And I think we need to imagine that. I think we're seeing some form of this in certain areas. In Latin America, at times you see greater unity. In Africa, at times you see greater unity. But in South Asia, post formal independence, we've kind of lost the imagination of thinking in terms of travel across our borders, people to people connections. If we cannot create state to state linkages, we need to find other forms of linking because our habitat just crosses for many communities. The habitat crosses, and it's something we need to, as progressive thinkers, we need to listen to these communities. People want to be, the Afghan community is being kind of the mode of governance is called governmentality. They're given ID cards, they're segregated, they're systemized, they're monitored. So we need to talk about the way power is operating on these communities and listen to their demands. And the left needs to formulate its manifesto, listening to demands of communities, right? We cannot just come up abstractly and take positions. We need to see, well, if we're talking about Kashmir, we need to talk to people in Kashmir. We need to talk to people in Gilgit-Baltistan and then formulate our policies. So coming back to your first question, I think so there are a lot of organizations that create alternatives to third world unity, which are empire based, which are for national bourgeoisie power to continue to maintain power. And of course, we have to oppose them, we have to expose them, and I think that's part of the intellectual work we have to do. If these pacts ever bring anything for the people, we should support them, but they don't. So we need concrete analysis of each pact and then take positions on them. And I think historically people have done that. They've opposed CETA, they've opposed Center. National Awami Party would have anti-imperialist day. They would have days in solidarity with Vietnam. And so this kind of third world solidarity at the people level, even if not the Pakistani state level, has always been there. Many progressive parties in the 70s and even today, parties show solidarity. Coming to Iran, America today, I think I have a different understanding of America to a lot of people. I think there's a term about techno-feudalism. I think that's very accurate. We can learn from it. I don't think America as a power or empire is going anywhere. I've been reading in my lifetime, every month there's a new op-ed saying that empire is on decline. I don't see that, because empires are not just about economic power. They are largely about that. They're also about desire. They're about how the self is formed, what the self desires. And the American dream, the concept of the self, the kind of the capitalist concept of the self, the individualism, the kind of dream of Hollywood, Bollywood dreams of the self dominate the imagination. And I think as long as America has us in that, in the realm of desire, dominates, it helps it dominate elsewhere. And that's why Fanon and others wrote so much about the transformation of self and the transformation of desire. And that's why also people like Gandhi and Bachcha Khan talked about desire as a, in changing what you think is beautiful, reconceptualizing the good, and just having a different view of what is good and what is valuable. Because without that transformation, hence Khudai Khidmat Kar, right? Service to the other is more valuable than individual self or kind of progress. But generally, individualism, concept of nuclear family, bradri, greed for a small group is validated in much of the world through media. That is the kind of mindset we're kind of plugged into. And at that level, empire wins. So we need to kind of fight on what is desirable as well. It's not just about, institution create some of what we desire, like media, but we need to kind of create new concepts at that level. What is the good life? What is desirable? And I think through various forms of technology, through a national bourgeoisie that is collaborative, through our desire who are working class to immigrate to America and follow this dream, the colonizers' dream for us, that also holds us back. So I think we need to kind of decolonization has to, there is a institutional level of decolonization, there's a decolonization that is about the self. But the self, of course, I don't want to say we can do it individually. It has to be in movements. It has to be through organizational structures. Individually, I cannot kind of decolonize desire even. So we have to do it in solidarity with each other in a community. But building those communities is something we need to do. I'll stop there for now.
Thank you, Comrade. That was a very good answer to it. Okay, so this is a bit of a funny ending. Someone asks that they see a cat lying near your door, if they could know the name. That's the last question. And then we can conclude the session.
Well, I can't see which cat is here at the moment, but there was Mousy Khan was sitting about there. Her name is Mousy Khan. So my wife's surname is Khan, and it's her, like she was adopted. She broke her leg, and my wife was looking after her. So, and her face looks like a mouse, so we call her Mousy Khan. But she's very independent. She's an anarchist cat. She's not a Marxist. She's completely anarchist. She does what she wants. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So, thank you, Comrade. Thank you so much for taking out the time for the session. So, just in conclusion, सब साथियों का शुक्रिया जिनने सेशन के लिए ट्यून इन किया हमारे अगस्त तक 9 सेशंस चलने हैं वीकली इन दिस कोर्स तो हम उम्मीद करते हैं कि आप अगले आने वाले भी सारे सेशंस ज्वाइन करेंगे इसके साथ साथ अगर आप एसआरजी की मेंबरशिप लेना चाहते हैं व्हिच इज बेसिकली free and you get access to extra reading and educational material. हमारा discussion forum है जिसमें आप ये वाली discussions जो sessions में होती हैं आपस में भी लोग आगे इससे मजीद बढ़ा सकते हैं, continue कर सकते हैं, engage कर सकते हैं. तो if you want to sign up for that you can find the form link in our page bios. और ये जो सेशन है ये तो हमारे YouTube चैनल पर ही बाकी भी तमाम सेशंस लाइव स्ट्रीम होंगे और ये भी अवेलेबल होगा. So thank you so much for to everyone for joining, and a special thanks to Comrade Qalandar for leading today's session.
सदा रही है मेरे दिल से पैहम ये होगा हर एक दुश्मने जा का सरखम सदा रही